After the wild success of the last video, somebody killed the owner of this account in a sober driving incident. Our dearly departed Fish One was only 5 years old at the time and was celebrating his recent fortunes with a light bit of methamphetamine and ketamine. And during this revelry, he was T-boned on the freeway by a family of 4. But anyway, the famous YouTuber Fish YouTube account must carry on. So it'll be run by me now, Fish2, the 65-year-old stock market analyst. Also, what is wrong with you guys? Last time there was some fucking goofy comments in the comment section. You rambunctious young gentlemen need to get it together. For real though, that video did crazy well. I set myself the goal of getting 200 subscribers by the end of the year, and now I'm probably going to get that like the day this video comes out. So I guess I have to make another goal, and I want to carry on my long-standing tradition of beating my friends to death. But after that, I want to continue to try to beat them in subscribers, so I want to get more subs than this guy. However, unlike the last couple times that happened, he actually makes videos, and unfortunately they're actually kind of good. So my hopes are not super up on that. But anyway, despite how well it did, I felt like my last video was too negative. So I wanted to do a video on something I actually really like instead. Even though everyone and their mom has already made some like analysis bullshit on this game, I still want to do something on Lisa.
Hey y'all, come look at this!
Good old Lisa the Painful. It was a sequel to a game that no one has ever played in their entire life, called Lisa the First. I know, shocking, fucking keep your shit together. But Lisa the Painful, it's a very unique RPG Maker game, and probably the most popular one of that too. Even more than something like One Shot or fuck, maybe even like Yume Nikki or Off. And I won't lie, a lot of the popularity is due to one video by Video Game Donkey, which is kind of cringe, but ignore that. If you didn't tell someone it was made in RPG Maker, you might not have even been able to tell, because to this day I've never seen anyone do like a weird 2D platformer-esque movement thing in RPG Maker. And like random weird RPG Maker games are my shit. I love them. But a lot of kind of games like these need something to make the turn-based gameplay not boring as shit. Lisa the Painful's solution to that is the combo system, which is that some characters can press buttons to beat their disobedient son, and then put in a special move if they put them in the right order to hit their other disobedient son who did not grab them a beer fast enough. Kind of like a fighting game. Instead of punching oiled up buff men, you punched oiled up fat dudes instead. And the main character has access to this. He always have at least one character with a command list. However, the game should have really included a last special move input thing, because if you use any other party members with the combo system, there's like a 60% chance you sit there with your thumb up your ass or remember what fucking combination you needed. But I mean, I kind of like it. It's a pretty decent way of doing things, honestly. And there's something I didn't realize when I decided to make this video, but this game got semi-remastered, or as some may say, a definitive edition. Which was cool. I hadn't seen any of the changes, so a couple things caught me off guard, like the campfire conversations between the party members, which wasn't even remotely a thing before, or some areas having like lighting physics for some reason. Oh well, also they apparently fixed a bunch of shit, but I didn't notice that, honestly. I had to look them up afterwards. This game also spurred a bunch of fan games, which I have to mention, because I know a bunch of people in the comments will bring this up if I don't. But some of them were cool. I wouldn't be surprised if you heard probably the best and most popular one, Lisa the Pointless. Even though the demo released when I was in high school, and now I'm old enough to legally drink and drive, so that's never coming out, but I just needed to mention it, because I do not want my comment section filled with goobers. Everything sucks and nothing is worth it anymore. Anyway, enough about my life. Things are pretty bad here too. The game is I guess a pretty unique post-apocalypse type beat, where there was a flash of light, then the entire world finally understood how an Overwatch player feels, because nearly all the grass and plants disappeared, as well as all of the women, and it is quickly established that everyone that is alive must have also been part of the Overwatch player sub-race of humans, because the main plot of the game revolves around everyone trying to fornicate with the only living female who just happens to be 12. But Your Honor, she did say she was 18, and you are taking this out of context, so... Fuck. Anyway, it is up to you, surrogate father, drug addict, and proud schizophrenic, Bradley Edwin Armstrong, to stop that from happening. And that, I guess, is the simplified version of the premise and the setting for the game. And I'd like to have it in the history books here, that you'll never find me uploading a 4-hour-long plot summary but a lot of my friends hadn't actually heard of this game before, so I felt like I had to. You know how it is. But that shit'll be important, I promise. But yeah, weird post-apocalypse set, like, sometime between the 1950s and 1980s. And the world's all fucked up, but it's not that fucked up. But everyone's stupid and sucks anyway, so it doesn't matter. You know how it is, you know. Which is a unique setting, but I think it was appropriate for what the creator was trying to put forward. Which was primarily the idea that men should take care of their mental health instead of just manning up and dealing with it. I'll elaborate on that later, though. Right now, I'm going to talk about something that I think I missed when I played this game the first time around. And I mean, I was like 16 at the time, don't judge me. Which was what joy was supposed to represent. Because I guess I've never thought about that. I guess first I should actually talk about what it is. Basically, joy is super meth. It makes you really strong to the point of being nearly invincible. And interestingly, it makes you feel nothing rather than whatever normal meth makes you feel like. Which is probably something like this. Reportedly, it only appears after the Flash happened, and it was part of a thing to make super soldiers or some shit. Gone kind of wrong. And after a while, anyone who has taken joy turns into a joy mutant, which are basically incredibly dangerous flesh animals with appearances akin to Yo Mama. Yeah, this might sound dumb, but I feel like joy was supposed to represent in some way. Nuclear bombs are weapons of mass destruction just in general. There's like a half implication that it was the, I guess, cause of the Flash, and a flash of light taking half the population and all the plants with it does not take a genius to put that fucking connection together. And the fact that it specifically only leaves the man makes me think it's a metaphor for a self-destructive need for a coping mechanism being, I guess, represented as the literal end of the world. Or I guess you could also see it as like a need to feel powerful or strong or manly, I guess, doing the same, because I suppose that would be the end result of joy in its literal effects. You're strong and you feel nothing, you can deal with anything. Or it's just a fucking nukes are bad and you shouldn't use them, that shit is dangerous type beat. But that would be dumb. The first two options obviously loop into the whole overarching theme, what the story is trying to convey. But for now, that's all I have to say on the matter. Psych, I've still got more shit to say. I think this is one of the only examples of why I could consider like a real comedy game, if you get what I mean by that. Like, it's not just a game with like jokes in it. The humor is, I guess, an integral part of it. Like, it's inseparable. If you removed it, the game would be completely incomplete. And tonally, it would be really fucking dark. Most of the time they are just goofs, but they're supposed to, I guess, show off, I guess, like an uncaring world. A lot of bad things happen to the protagonist personally, but the world around him continues and moves on in, I guess, its own wacky way, despite Brad's misfortunes. And it appears cruel because of that. But yeah, that's what I want to say about it. Anyway, I'm actually done with the setting now. I think the party members in this game are important enough to get their own section in this video, because a lot of them do feel like people in and of themselves. Probably better than most RPGs, especially because after researching some of the shit for this video, I found out that there's a description written for all of them on the game's website, which apparently there is a website for this game. I like how it says what everyone's job was before the Flash, and I like how every single one of them is fucking lame as shit. Also, looking at the lineup, you already know who's going on the party. It's not even a fucking contest. I think that this and the campfire conversations really help with you actually caring about your party members even the slightest bit. Obviously, that won't stop you from sending all of them to their fucking untimely demise at the hands of Russian roulette because you were slightly poor. But, there are some fucking super stinkers in there. Who played this game? Whole game, played through the entire thing and thought, yeah, Beastborn is the fucking guy I want with me at all times. This is the one. Speaking of being fat, ugly, and stupid, 12 of the 30 party members suffer from joy withdrawals as well, which is same as the protagonist. The severity of their addiction varies from person to person, which I think is a cool feature, but also it plays into the, again, overall theme of people not coping with shit well. It also representing the fact that all of them have a very weird and obvious gimmick. That tends to be a thing with most of the NPCs in the game as well. But the individualism all of them have is a double-edged sword as well at times. Because of all the ways your precious little babies can fucking die horribly. Like being slaughtered because you want to keep your iPod Nano, being kidnapped while you're asleep, touched inappropriately, and then killed, and having their precious little head bitten off right in front of your fucking eyes. By Joy Mutant, of course. Nobody does that normally. And specifically, I think the Joy Mutant thing is cool because there isn't a lot of RPGs that throw in something where your party member can permanently die during fucking any turn. It puts a lot of pressure on you. Every turn that goes by, one of your little angels can get turned into a little angel. Just so we're clear, if you haven't played it, it's specific moves that do that. If Brad gets hit by them, it doesn't do anything, it just knocks him out like normal. And, just in case anyone was wondering, the party that I settled on was Geese, Carp, and Buckets. And I decided on those guys because they were awesome. But I want to talk about the motivations that most of the party members even have for joining you. Because other than the ones that you fucking basically kidnap, for the most part they want what your enemies want as well, which is the last living female on the planet, as far as I know. Even though she's like 12. And that being a universal thing in this world, I think was meant to act as a parallel to how in real life, loneliness drives a lot of people to do bad things, or think bad things. Obviously not as severe as, like, being a pedophile, but the need for female companionship or physical affection at all is a very strong thing in a lot of people. It can make people kind of lose their grip on what is normal and what isn't, especially with how much is put on a pedestal. Because I'm sure you as the viewer have also had someone you know who they can't seem to understand that being with someone won't solve any of their personal problems. They still let it constantly harm their mental health. Not like I'd ever say that's an easy thing to get over. Quite the opposite. I think that's also what the game's trying to put forward. I think that's why the decision was made to make her underage in the first place, because the story would pretty much be identical if she was 18. Just the age is really only used to draw the attention to the stuff I was talking about. Anyway, if you know me in real life, that little section about not being able to get any bitches, I was not targeted at anybody in particular, so do not take offense or I will kill you the next time you talk to me. Anyway, moving on. I've mentioned him in passing, but I think Brad is a really well-written character. And like any good character in the expansive, fall around some fat, severely mentally ill loser genre, he embodies the game's messages in their entirety. As everything I've said about the themes and shit apply to him more than anyone else. And they do it in some cool little ways. I like that Brad never once speaks about his past or his childhood or anything like that. And you only ever get to see what sort of life he lived before the events of the story through flashbacks, hallucinations, or both. And those flashbacks also paint a picture that even then he wouldn't have talked about the things that happened to him to anyone, even when prompted. Not even to his closest friends, who he trusted enough to keep the secret of the only living female. I mean, which also turned out to be the safest of bets, so maybe he was right. But if I'm going to talk more about Brad, I'm going to need to go into more detail about the events of the story. So the first time we see Brad is from when he was a child, and after getting the shit kicked out of him, he leaves his friends to go home. Notably, these are the same friends as before, and once he gets home, Things haven't ever been easy for Brad, which is made even worse when you take into account the events of the first game, in which Brad's sister, Lisa, holy shit, title drop, commits suicide due to the abuse she endures from their father, Marty Armstrong, which includes, but is not limited to, physical abuse, verbal abuse, rape, Anyway, now that we're done talking about the first 5 minutes of the game, you can see why I think the comedy is so important. And this literally haunts Brad for the entire duration of the game, where he sees visions of her constantly, and implying that he feels immensely guilty about it, regardless of how much it was his fault or not. But unfortunately, like a lot of people who were abused by their parents, Brad also falls in the same mentality that his father did. That being the man up, don't be a pussy type shit that a lot of people nowadays even still subscribe to. As Marty wasn't able to deal with the loss of his wife and pretty much lost his mind, and that's why he's a dick, I guess. But anyway, skip forward like 30 years, Brad finds a baby that turns out to be a girl. He decides to be for the best if he tries to raise it. Obviously poorly, because look at bro's childhood skull emoji. Brad shows he's been taking joy as a way to deal with shit, but he tries to quit because of the kid, who will henceforth be referred to as Buddy, due to that being her name. And it's important to note that Buddy sort of looks like Lisa, which I'm sure has no form of mental repercussions or implications on our plucky protagonist. Wink. It's because Brad feels the need to redeem himself for the death of his sister because he feels responsible in some way for it, and on top of that, he feels a burning desire to do better than his father and give someone what he never had. Anyway, the next really significant thing that happens to Brad is his interactions with each of his surviving friends, where he learns from the first that basically all of this is their fault, because they tried to give Buddy to a powerful army that just so happens to be run by Brad's last adoptive kid, but that's neither here nor there. Sometimes you gotta drop a kid if they've got bad vibes, you know how it is. And that they think Brad is a selfish asshole, and that they were doing what was right for the world. And from the second you find out that he had a hard life as well, but wouldn't ever take it out on the world the same way Brad does, and that he had quote-unquote done what had needed to be done, implying that he attempted to impregnate Buddy. Ignoring how bad that is, I'll talk about that in a second. Both these characters and these interactions paint something that's very important to Brad as a person. That being that nobody really understands him, even people close to him. Which is evidenced by two flashback scenes, one directly with Rick, who is the first guy, and the second with Sticky's dad, Sticky being the second guy. In Rick's flashback, which I like to point out is the shining example that Brad seems to remember Rick by before the flash, indicating that he didn't really like him that much, is a short gag of Rick just obviously being a cuck, and being too terrified of confrontation to actually improve or find meaning in his life. Followed by a conversation between him and Brad where he says that Brad's life is awesome because he teaches kids karate and that he wishes his life was more like his. Brad's life was not awesome, funnily enough. And it's clear that Brad never let him know about anything or even gave an indication, even enough for him to question what he just said. But the second flashback is a lot more subtle than the first in regards to how it shows Brad and how reserved he is. Because it involves a conversation with Sticky's dad, and also it's a hallucination as well as a flashback, don't fucking question it. Because Sticky also had a shitty upbringing. His dad is obviously homeless and dumb and stupid and fucking dumb. But there's an indication, even if slight, that Sticky's father cares about him, which is significantly more than Marty ever gave Brad during his childhood. And because of that, Sticky makes a point on Brad acting selfishly, and he doesn't understand it. And again, that makes it clear that Brad just never, ever talked about the sort of things that he went through, or how hard it was on him. And it's something that's entirely understandable. If you have something so vital to the human experience missing, like not having parents that love you, it would make you feel incredibly isolated from everyone around you, like you're less human in a way, because you could never really expect someone who hasn't experienced the same sort of feelings to really truly understand how bad it hurts. And on the other side of the coin, you can also understand how hard it would be to understand someone like that as well. And you may be wondering, Fish, how can you talk about something like that in such confidence? Aren't you supposed to be silly? Keep my business out of your fucking mouth. Anyway, in Lisa the Joyful it is revealed that Sticky didn't actually do anything weird. Yay. The next, significant thing that happens to Brad is when he meets Marty again. Don't want to make more Overwatch jokes, but, a child molester hasn't stood up in 30 years, come on, it writes itself. Anyway, he was alone on an island with Buddy, which is pretty much the worst thing that could ever happen to Brad's entire life, right in front of him. And understandably, given the circumstances, Brad immediately tries to kill him. Buddy and Marty both try to convince Brad that he's not a bad guy anymore, and you as a player are given the choice to either kill Marty or spare him. Neither of these matter, because Brad kills him anyway. It's noteworthy you get the same choice on whether to kill Sticky and Rick, after Sticky pretty much says he touched his daughter freaky style, but it does matter there, because even though Sticky did his best Minecraft YouTuber impression in Brad's eyes, he's still able to show mercy, even to something as bad as that. I think the fact that he's willing to do that, again, shows internally he hasn't dealt with the trauma at all. He doesn't even entertain the thought that Marty's life could have changed, or that Marty's morals could have changed in the last 20 or 30 years. And again, you can understand why he would do something like this. That is a common thing throughout a lot of Brad's actions. They are all understandable only within the context of his life. And again, a big failing of him as a person is his failure to communicate that with other people. And again, that loops back into the idea that people should take care of their mental health, talk to people, shit like that. I mean, I don't have to say why, I just fucking... You can read, come on, bro. There's one more big event I'd like to talk about, and if you play the game, you know what it is. I'm gonna have to give it its own section. So I'd like to mention that Brad's actual, factual, concrete coping mechanism is with drugs. And we get a flashback of him being addicted to painkillers before the Flash, and obviously Joy after. And obviously, doing drugs because your life sucks is bad. So everyone he knows shits on him for that all the time. None more than Buzzo, the guy that follows Brad around and basically is just there to torture him. And while Buzzo is a real person that exists, he mostly acts as a manifestation of guilt for Brad, constantly reminding him of how he quote-unquote failed his sister, Lisa. And on top of that, the masks he gets his little gang members to wear are meant to be from something Lisa and Brad did when they were kids, which is actually next level hater behavior. Like, goddamn. But yeah, on to the last thing now. If you've played this game, you knew this part was coming. Brad once again finds himself in a position where he has no one. Buddy keeps running away and he felt the need to abandon his party. He tries to help Buddy one last time after she was being attacked, and she tells him pretty much the worst thing he could ever possibly hear. That being that Marty was a better father to her than Brad was. Brad can't even come up with so much as a simple response to that. The game tells you that Brad's body is feeling strange, and in this moment, Brad Armstrong is dead. His transformation into a Joy Mutant has begun, and he will shortly lose his fucking mind. And in a way, I believe this was supposed to symbolize suicide, or at least the moment someone would decide to take their own life. But I'd also like to note, earlier I mentioned Buzzo being a manifestation of guilt. While I'm not sure how turning into a Joy Mutant actually works, Brad is force-fed Joy by Buzzo midway through the game, and if you do look at Buzzo as symbolic of Brad's guilt over his sister's death, then that would be what really kills him, and I wouldn't say that was a stretch as what was kind of being put forward. Yeah, damn. Tough stuff. But Brad isn't quite dead yet. In lieu of any good ideas, Brad decides to fight the whole army, including its leader, who is Brad's last adoptive kid, to the death, alone. Now your party does show up right before you get your ass kicked, but they're also there to try and stop you. So Brad just does what any normal person would and kills them all in cold blood. After splattering your fucking party all over the ground, Brad turns around, drops one of the hardest quotes in any video game ever, and turns like 40 people into meat. Beats up his last kid who, despite Brad's currently mutating meth muscles, would have absolutely kicked his ass if he couldn't heal, before turning a buddy to have his last conversation. Damn. There's a really interesting moral choice in there, where you're given the option to hug Brad or not. And if you don't, it's very likely that you also torture small animals and set fire to orphanages and shit, you fucking monster. But on a more serious note, Brad dies a failure in his own eyes. His last moments are spent recognizing they fucked up the only thing he actually ever cared about, that being raising a child. Or at least that's what Brad thinks. Because you don't get much dialogue from Rando, the warlord that was Brad's kid. But Brad manages to raise him well, somehow without recognizing it. Throughout the sequel, Lisa the Joyful, you get to talk to him a lot more, and you learn that Rando deeply respects Brad, and owes it to him that he grew into a strong, compassionate person, even in the dire circumstances of the apocalypse. It should be noted that Rando was an orphan before Brad took him in, so Brad, almost in a literal way, gave Rando what he never had. But once again, guilt clouds Brad's vision, and he can't see this because Buddy is effectively another Lisa to him. The last thing I want to mention to try and tie everything together is that the whole point of Brad as a character, so if he hadn't been so closed off and reserved as he was about his trauma or feelings, he would still be alive. And now, I don't think I have to spell out what this is a parallel to in real life. I think you can infer that, but that's why I think he's such a well-written character. Almost everything he does manages to be something terrible, influenced by guilt or trauma. But you could never have expected him to act any different in anything that he did during the course of the game. He truly is one of the characters of all time. I think there's one thing we can all learn from him, and that is betting on a homeless guy to do Russian roulette for money is awesome, and we should all be doing it. This section just for some random bits and bobs I want to mention, so like and subscribe and shit, share this video with your grandma, extort her for money, I don't give a fuck. Basically just don't expect anything fucking deep from this part. Not like there was anything deep before this. So there's a reoccurring gag of the Salvation Rangers, obviously in reference to the Power Rangers, and you unceremoniously find them all dead, turned to Joy Mutants in the last area of the game. And it's one of the few things in the game that's genuinely gotten an emotional reaction out of me, because I am a super tough guy, Giga Chad, you know, behind the screen. But it's actually, like, really sad. I don't really know how to articulate why, but it's kind of like a perversion of innocence, if you get what I mean. Because it's always like a silly little moment whenever they show up, and now they're all, like, fucked up and dead. With absolutely no prior warning. It's also notable, unlike a lot of things with the suffer not the sins of the father trope, that the creator, Austin Jorgensen, had a very good relationship with his dad, to the point where there's a section where you use a bulldozer that's only a reference to him. And I was talking to one of my friends about this game while I was making the intro to this video, and he asked me if it was the game that was really dark and fucked up, and I told him that it wasn't. And after I finished writing it, I just blatantly lied to him directly to his face, like an asshole. And also, I heard somewhere that the PS5 version of this game is super censored, and I don't care enough to validate that, but I heard that at some point they stated that all playable characters are at least 18. And the idea that Buddy is 18 in the Joyful is so fucking funny to me. Like, at the end of the Joyful, you see what she looks like as an adult, so in Painful and most of Joyful, she would just be a super midget. My bad for taking so long with this video, by the way. I tried to get one a month, but I just couldn't hack it this time. And speaking of videos, this is technically my 100 sub special, so yay! Congratulations to me. I guess. Anyway, I will see you Johns in 6 months for my advanced gooning tutorial.
I'm not making videos anymore. That's Adam.
Yay!